Hi everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. Earlier this year I made a video about the books that have stuck with me the most from the first half of 2023, mostly because I'm more interested in, I think, sharing books that stick with me for reasons that are not just, oh, these are the best books I read, or these are my favorite books that I read. Some of these are, some of these are definitely going to be new favorites. But I really wanted to get at this thing where some of the books and their stories just really get under my skin, or I can't stop thinking about them, or I know for a fact that I'm going to go back and reread them further down the line. So this is the second half of that first original idea. I decided to wait until January to film it, and that turned out to be a good decision because at the very end of December, I read one of the best books that I have read all year, and probably one of the best books I've ever read, to be perfectly honest with you. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into those books. So for the last 6 months of the year, it was actually 6 books exactly that are going to stick with me going into the new year. The first one, I don't have a physical copy with me because I got it out of the library, but that's Once Upon a Tome by Oliver Darkshire. This is kind of a memoir, kind of a literary comedy type book about his experiences working as a bookseller in a crumbly, dusty, old antiquarian bookshop in London. It was an absolutely beautiful homage to the bizarreness that you can find when you're working in an industry filled with book people and obscure tomes and knowledge. It talks about his own experiences as a queer man in this space that is traditionally considered to be very hetero. It's also about his experiences eventually getting diagnosed with narcolepsy, which is the reason why he takes the bookshop job in the first place, is he keeps not being able to hold down other jobs because he falls asleep all the time. And he doesn't know yet that that's what's going on and what he's doing, but it is definitely one of those, the real story is the friends we made along the way kind of book. And it was just utterly charming and endearing, and he is a fantastic follow on social media if you are interested in hearing any more cool bookish tidbits. The next book that I have is I guess I was gonna say it's the only nonfiction, but technically Once Upon a Tome is also nonfiction. It's just memoir, but this is more like nonfiction. And that is Four Lost Cities, A Secret History of the, what is the subtitle? The sticker is over it. Oh my gosh, A Secret History of the Urban Age by AnnaG Newitz. I love AnnaG Newitz's writing. I knew that I wanted to read all of their books, and that's going to be one of my projects going into 2024, is I have plans to reread all of their books. Well, read the ones I haven't, reread the ones I have, and continue on with my listen to their podcast, Our Opinions Are Correct, with Charlie Jane Anders. Also have a project to read all of Charlie Jane Anders' books, so we'll see how much of that I get done in 2024. But AnnaG is a science journalist who writes science fiction, but this book in particular is a nonfiction book about 4 different ancient cities that have been quote-unquote lost to time. What these urban projects and experiments can tell us about the state of humanity then and what we're like now, and what kind of things we're really interested in doing as people, the structures we leave behind, the stories that tells, and also really interrogates and deconstructs the idea of a lost city at all. That can come with a lot of very colonialist expectations, also connotations, which is what I meant to say, but expectations is also correct. It can come with a lot of colonialist connotations, as there is this narrative of a usually white male European explorer coming and rediscovering a lost city, and how that can really just, that romanticization of it can really just be more about that man and his project than about what was actually going on in the city. So as a work of archaeology and anthropology, science journalism, there's really nothing like it. I think about this book constantly. I feel like I really learned not just a lot of facts about these ancient cities, and they do Çatalhöyük in Turkey, the town of Pompeii, medieval megacity of Angkor in Cambodia, home of Angkor Wat, and the indigenous metropolis of Cahokia, which I had heard of all of these. I knew the least about Cahokia, but it's something that I still think about constantly, especially as somebody who lives in a city. It has changed the way that I look at the place that I live, even though clearly the city that I live in is still actively inhabited and it is not lost, I think, by any stretch of the word. But anyway, I would really recommend this book to everyone, I think, regardless of your interest. It's a good one to pick up. AnnaG is a fantastic writer, and I can't wait to read more of their fiction in 2024. Okay, next up is a book that actually had been on my radar, but then it came as a recommendation from my husband, who is also a reader. He does not read as many books as I do per year, but I think he is better at reading books and choosing the titles that he reads more meaningfully. Like, he is way more likely to choose a book that he knows he's going to like and enjoy, that's going to challenge him in some way, that's going to be like a meaningful selection. Whereas I will randomly take chances on things I've never heard of sometimes and just see what happens. So when I get a recommendation from him, I know it's gonna be good. And that book was Deacon King Kong by James McBride. So I know this book really had kind of a moment in 2020 because it was the Oprah Book Club pick and it kind of exploded, and I knew I loved James McBride as a writer, but I had never read this book and I really didn't know much about it at all going into it. I was like, why is the title Deacon King Kong? What's up with this hat, like this little pork pie hat type deal on the cover of it? And I'm really glad I went in not knowing too much about it, but this is a story that's kind of a snapshot in time of this neighborhood in Harlem in 1969, and the action opens up with this kind of old drunk deacon man, the titular Deacon King Kong, who goes by the name of Sport Coat, saunters up into the town square and shoots a guy who is the sort of up-and-coming, I guess, like drug dealer and gang leader, but who used to kind of be this when he was a teenager, used to be the sort of golden child of this housing project. You know, he was a baseball star, he was going to go to college, all that stuff, and then things happened. So the events just start. Now, this just has one of the best opening chapters. I mean, really just up there with the best opening chapters I have ever read of all time. I think that I compared this when I started reading it to listening to a freestyle jazz album that was describing a city block. And then later on, I found out that James McBride actually is a jazz musician, and I believe went to Oberlin for a while studying music. There's a really excellent episode of the First Edition podcast that Book Riot puts out that's an interview with James McBride about his newest book, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, which I'm gonna get to this year. We have a copy of it because he's one of Sean's favorite writers. He's quickly becoming one of mine. And I just didn't get to it in 2023. But this book and these characters were just so well drawn that it stuck with me. There have been so many amazing, like, quotable moments. This is a book that actually made me cry, and like, books frequently make me emotional, but they don't usually make me cry. And this one gave me some actual tears at the end. So Deacon King Kong, fantastic book, highly recommend, just period. Okay, so we have one book here next that is another novel. It's a romance book that's going to have stuck with me. This is a particular type of romance. It's from the gothic romance genre, so I have heard that some people are like, oh, it's not really a romance, or some people that read it more as a mystery or horror being like, well, it's not really that. It's a gothic novel, guys. Like, that's a whole genre. It's been a thing for hundreds of years, and it's one of my favorites, to be honest. But this is an incredible example of the form, and that is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. I also purchased her second book, her new book, Vampires of El Norte, which I'm very excited to read. I meant to read that during like Halloween spooky time last year and just wasn't able to get to it in time, but I loved The Hacienda. So this is a story of this woman named Beatriz whose father was on the wrong side of the Mexican Revolution. So he was killed. Her family is on the outs. You know, nobody likes her. She's basically a social pariah. She and her mother have no money. So she decides that she is going to marry a wealthy landowner, this hacienda owner named, what is his name? Rodolfo. That's right. He sucks. He's the worst. I mean, like, that's not a spoiler. You just know it as soon as you start reading it. But anyway, she wants to get security for herself and for her mother, and she wants to kind of forget the fact that, you know, everyone hates her because of her father's political affiliations. But what she does not know is that the hacienda may be haunted or possessed in some way by the ghost of Rodolfo's dead wife, the previous wife that nobody will talk about, and none of the servants, who are mostly like indigenous people or multiracial people, are not going to say anything about. This Gothic novel engages with the concept of like race and who is considered racialized in a way that I don't think is usually explicitly addressed in a lot of early Gothic fiction. But this one is very, very good at dealing with the context of who is racialized in the wake of different revolutions and political regime changes, and what does that actually mean to be a person who, I don't want to say like owns the land, because it isn't just about land ownership. Maybe what does it mean to be a person who is of the land, right? Like, does it mean you are the person who is actually working there, or does it mean you are the person who is profiting off of other people's labor in the fields? And the hacienda, like the titular hacienda, it is also very much about like, what does it mean for something to be your house, your home? Really interrogates that through the lens of different like women's experiences, depending on their race, their cultural backgrounds, all of that kind of thing. This book also has a hot priest in it. That's part of the reason why I picked it up and read it, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. I will say, if you're looking for a sort of happily ever after, happy for now romance, that is not what this is. It doesn't end tragically, but that's also not the way how Gothic romances usually work. But I will say it ends pretty hopefully for our characters. It is a very satisfying book, was deliciously creepy. A lot of the writings about the haunting of the house are gonna stick with me forever. Okay, final two books. Both of these I read very close to the end of last year, and one of them is the very short, very slight The Employees by Olga Raun. This is subtitled A Workplace Novel of the 22nd Century and translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken, perhaps. Oh, this book is weird. I don't know how to describe it other than it's weird, and that's why I gravitated toward it. So I heard Jen Campbell talking about this. She compared some of the like sci-fi speculative elements of it to being like interrogations of what it is like to go through IVF and infertility. And someone who's going through infertility stuff right now, I was like, okay, I'm gonna read a weird sci-fi book that's maybe about that. This is a bizarre book. All of the little chapters are these individual statements that are essentially like audio recordings. Some of them are very heavily redacted, and what you piece together over the course of the book is that you are reading or listening to these statements from like the final days, hours, something or other of people living on this spaceship. They are a mixture of humans and then kind of robotic android type people. It's a little bit unclear. They never explicitly say like, oh, such and such androids or whatever, but they're very clearly separated across these lines. And then they are all on this spaceship getting ready for a launch, but they have to take care of these objects that are kind of like eggs. There's a lot of, it's not birth imagery, but a lot of, I guess, reproductive imagery with the eggs, how they make them feel warm, how they begin to ooze liquids, how being near the eggs gives them these amazing dreams and they really want to be around them and protect them. And what I'm describing kind of sounds like it makes no sense as I'm saying it out loud. But this is a book that really just makes me think, again, like so many of these themes are like themes of what does it mean to be a person in relationship to another person or in relationship to the land. So it is very much a story about what we owe each other, what is important to take care of, what is important to prioritize when certain powers in the world are set against you. Because let's not forget, the book is called The Employees, and it is very much a critique of the ways in which workplaces, particularly nowadays, exist to kind of isolate people and silo them off and create wedges between them and highlight differences between them in order to make them turn on each other and not be able to effectively like resist whatever the big thing is, you know, whatever the Shinra corporation of the context is. This is a book that as I was reading, I really wanted to just annotate and reread. So I am going to let it percolate for a while, but I'm definitely going to be rereading it. Hopefully this year. It was so interesting. I guess on that note, I'm going to add another book at the last second, which I don't know why I didn't think of this in the first place, but the other book that I want to add is Jen's book, Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit, which is a poetry collection about her experience of what it's like as a disabled queer woman going through fertility treatment, experiencing infertility, IVF, and writing about that, situated in conversation with her going through a lot of her own medical records from childhood and encountering a lot of medical ableism and ableism coming from doctors. That book's on my bedside table right now. I'm like rereading it every month or so, and it's just incredibly wonderful. Go buy Jen's book. I can send links down below. I know she's closing down her web store as she prepares for the birth of her new baby. But I will put something so that you can find a copy of it. So, surprise 7th book that stuck with me. The final book is one of the books that I was gifted for Christmas. Sean gave me a bunch of comic books for Christmas, and I read this one very nearly in one day. I tried to read it slowly. I couldn't. I was weak. And I just blitzed right through this absolute tome of a book, and this is Şübek Lübek by Dina Mohammed. And Şübek Lübek, the English title is Your Wish is My Command, which is like the beginning of the rhyme that a genie or a jinn says when it comes out of its bottle. The book was originally written in Arabic, so you read it from right to left, similar to if you've ever read like a manga or something, anything else that's like not originally written in English, or another thing that goes left to right. And it is absolutely phenomenal story, centering on this guy named Shokri, who is a newspaper kiosk owner in the city of Cairo. And this is a world in which genies and wishes and things like that are real, but they are not all created equally. So most of the wishes that exist in the world are these petty little 3rd class and 2nd class wishes that are kind of the shitty ones that have the unforeseen terrible side effects, or they don't last very long, they're just not great. But Shokri has come into possession as a young person, and now he's old, but he's had for most of his life 3 first-class wishes. So each of the 3 chapters of this story follows one of those wishes to kind of where it winds up and how it impacts the people who have it, and who have to decide, you know, what is your heart's desire? Like, what is the greatest thing that you ever want? And is that even something that you would want if you had the opportunity to have it, truly? Again, books don't usually make me cry, but this book made me cry. I mean, like, it's the final days of 2023, and I'm just like absolutely blazing through this, sitting on the couch, really enjoyed it. Oh my God, it was incredible. Walk, don't run. Run, don't walk to go get yourself a copy of this book. I will be rereading it. I'm very curious to see if there was ever an audio version made, because I feel like that could be very interesting. And one of my favorite things about this book, without totally giving away things, is that all of the genies are designed as like creatures that are made out of Arabic calligraphy. And they all have different designs. This is seriously just one of the greatest books, like one of the greatest comics I've read ever. It completely blew me away. So those are all the books that stuck with me through the second half of 2023. Now it's 2024, and it's time to turn over a new leaf and get some new books sticking to me, sticking in my craw, having me think about them and what I like about them. So let me know if you have read any of these, or what was the book that stuck with you the most through 2023. It can be one that you loved, it can be one that you hated. I mean, if y'all watched a couple months ago my vlog, you know how much I despised my reread of A Court of Thorns and Roses. Sorry, not sorry, y'all. I just can't with Sarah J. Maas, and I can't with her books. I've tried, and it's just not gonna happen. But you know, you've also heard me gush about the things that I absolutely loved here. So let's get a conversation going down in the comments. On your way down there, if you like this video and you would like to see more of what I do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. That's pretty much the only way you're gonna find out if I post any new videos, because I am not really sharing stuff to other social medias anymore. Been there, done that. I'm kind of just putting stuff out there into the void. And if you want to watch it and know when it comes, make sure you subscribe, because that is probably the only way you will know. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.